Hello, I'm Zahra Sethna, host of Collapse Life. It's nice to have you back with us. They say there's no greater warrior than a mother protecting her children. And for moms today, there are so many dangers to protect against, from electronic addiction and harmful social media to toxic foods and pharmaceuticals that seem to be everywhere we turn. So today we have a warrior mom with us, Zen Honeycutt. She's the founder of a nonprofit called Moms Across America and an author. And her story is a powerful example of how it's possible to take personal experiences and deep seated concerns and turn them into significant and meaningful action. So, Zen, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Zara, and I really appreciate your listeners. Thank you, everybody, for being on with us today.
So, Moms Across America has brought a lot of much needed attention to issues like food safety and environmental toxins and children's health in general. So, just quickly tell us what motivated you to found the organization?
Well, like millions of mothers and fathers across the country, I was struggling with my children's health issues. They had allergies, some of at one point up to 20 to 21 different food intolerances and allergies. It was extremely difficult to cook for them. Going to social events was kind of like a landmine. Were they going to grab a cookie that happened to have nuts in it, and we end up in the hospital, which happened a couple of times. And my husband and I at the time didn't have those types of health issues. So we were very confused as to what was going on. They ended up also developing asthma, autoimmune issues, autism symptoms. And so when I looked into the food supply and learned about GMOs, genetically modified organisms, and glyphosate and other toxic chemicals, I realized that that was most likely the thing that was causing my children's health issues, and they definitely contributed. There were other things as well, but when we made the changes to the diet, regardless of what caused those issues in the first place, their health improved. And we have, there's lots of stories around that, but just to sum it up, we ended up, saving ourselves tens of thousands of dollars a year by switching to organic. One of my sons hasn't been to a doctor for any, health reason other than a sports checkup for 10 years, and the other two very infrequently. So see that it's like we can't afford to not eat organic, and realizing what was going on with the food supply, GMOs in fact impacting animals to the extent that the third generation was sterile. I
Wow.
realized that this is not just a my family needs to eat organic issue. This is a community issue because my son's future spouses are out there somewhere. And if I want them, or if they want to be able to experience the profound love that it is to have one's own child, it's important that their spouses and the community members are also eating organic and avoiding toxic chemicals that can cause endocrine disruption and reproductive damage. So it became a community issue for me, and I started
Mhm.
Moms Across America to raise awareness across the country, particularly in Fourth of July parades. We joined into Fourth of July parades with
Mm.
banners that say "Moms Across America March to label GMOs." At the time, it was to label to raise awareness about them, and that sparked a movement with over 600 leaders creating over 1,000 events in the next 5 years in all 50 states. A reach on Facebook of 300,000 a week within the first 3 months, and uh, you know, a reach of what's estimated now to be over 120 million just on social media, being in a dozen movies or so, publishing my book in Japan and the US, and it just being a whole movement of moms that are very dedicated. We call ourselves a national coalition of unstoppable moms, because once we see not only the problem but the solution, we want to
Mm.
tell everybody about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a huge piece to take on. So and some powerful forces on the other side. Tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you've experienced and how you overcame them.
Well, one of the biggest challenges was just not knowing how to do what I wanted to do. I was clear on my vision. I wanted to create a future of health and freedom. I wanted to transform the food supply and health in America and beyond, because that's the only way I saw that my children would be able to have a thriving future, was that the food supply needed to change. We needed to have GMOs at least labeled or not in the food supply. We need to have a clean, non-toxic, nutrient-dense food supply without these pesticides and toxins and practically every single bite, especially if you're not eating organic. And the challenge was, putting together events and creating a nonprofit when I had no experience in doing that. I'm a former
Mm,
fashion designer, artist. You can see the art of my art on the wall. I don't have a background for running a nonprofit, for reading, hundreds of scientific studies, for compiling information about those studies and consulting with doctors and farmers and all of that. And what I had to get over was that even though I didn't have that experience, I could and I would and I must
mm,
do it anyway.
mm.
And so
It's
I just got the people around me that knew how to do those types of things. Got the website designer to build it. Eventually, I got a good graphic designer. For a little while, I did try to make my memes myself, and they were horrible, but I put them out anyway. Like I realized they don't have to be perfect.
yeah.
It just needs to get done. It needs to happen, and eventually, I will gather a team to do those things. So I think the biggest challenge for anything in life too is the mindset of, are you going to choose to listen to the voices that say you can't do this because of circumstances, time and money or lack of knowledge, or are you going to choose to create actions based on the future that you want to create? And for me, that's health and freedom. And so you
Mhm,
need to be clear about that vision,
mhm.
first of all, what you want to create, and then you need to, in my eyes, you need to, create partnership, agreement, promises, take action, and take steps every day to fulfill on that future. And if you do that, you may not be completely successful in having everything go the way you want. We had a lot of breakdowns along the way, and they're covered in my book. But you will definitely accomplish a lot more
Mhm.
if you make a promise to accomplish something and you have partnership and you're taking actions. You'll go a lot further. And for sure, Moms Across America has been a major contributing factor to shifting the organic marketplace from 32 billion when we first got started to 67 billion today. We've
Yeah,
over doubled. Our actions have contributed to doubling the sales of organic.
for sure. There's no doubt there's been a contribution there. And I think what you just said is so inspirational because all of us have something that we're passionate about, some problem that we'd like to see solved. And often we think it's just so big where, I'm just one person. What can I do? But doing something, even if it's only a partial, solution, it's better than doing nothing. So I,
Yes,
I think that your
absolutely.
story really resonates on that. Um, One of the things that your organization does that's actually kind of gathered a little bit of news coverage is that you test foods and then you report on the findings of what's in those foods. And most recently, you tested a breakfast cereal called, ironically, Loaded, and it was actually loaded with heavy metals and agrochemicals and things that you didn't expect. Tell us a little bit about that research.
Sure. Yes, Moms Across America tested. We originally started out by testing for glyphosate in the food supply because it's the most widely used herbicide in the world. And when I learned about GMOs, that 80% of GMOs are engineered to withstand glyphosate. So glyphosate was being sprayed on genetically modified crops as a weed killer, and still is, mostly soy, corn, canola, and sugar beets, and which are a huge commodity in practically everything that we eat. And so they're sprayed directly on those crops. And we realized that glyphosate is, most likely getting into a lot of our food, even though there were no tests to show that. When I learned that it doesn't wash, dry, or cook off, I'm like, well, it's probably in a lot of our food. And then when I learned that glyphosate is also sprayed as a drying agent on non-GMO crops that are not organic, such as
Mm.
wheat and oats and barley and lentils and chickpeas, mung beans, things like that. And the residues can be at very high levels. I was like, oh wow, we really have to go organic, not just non-GMO, but we have to go
Mhm.
organic if we want to avoid glyphosate. And most likely, glyphosate is contaminating the majority of our food supply. And when I had that realization and I learned what glyphosate does, it can destroy the beneficial gut bacteria and allow for the proliferation of the pathogenic gut bacteria, contributing to inflammation, not just in the body, but in the brain, contributing to autism symptoms, which is what my son had. When I learned it's a chelator, meaning it grabs onto or makes unavailable the vital nutrients of any living thing it touches, I realized it contributes to vitamin mineral deficiency, which leads to a lack of brain function and organ and body function. And it also contributes to endocrine disruption with the gut microbiome. I forgot to mention that, being disturbed, mood disorders, all kinds of autoimmune issues and chronic disease. And so when I learned how glyphosate functions. It's an antimicrobial, it's an endocrine disruptor, it's a carcinogen, it causes liver and kidney disease. It can harm sperm, kill and harm sperm. It can androgenize baby girls, we learned later on.
Wow.
All these different ways in which glyphosate functions. I said, when I heard that a panelist said, our biggest problem, they were pro GMO people. I was studying them, and they said our biggest problem are these mom bloggers that are saying their kids are getting better when they don't eat GMOs and they eat organic, and because they have no evidence. And I said, ding, we have to get evidence. So I decided to bug a farmer friend of mine to find a lab that would test for glyphosate in our children's urine, finding it in our bodies and also in breast milk and in tap water. And we did that. And we found levels of glyphosate in 70 to 90% of the tap water and urine sampled, and some at very high levels. My son had the levels of a farmer of glyphosate in his urine when he had a sudden onset of autism symptoms, and cleared up. Those cleared up. The glyphosate levels were no longer detectable within 6 weeks of eating organic. It could have been earlier. The other studies show 2 weeks. But we retested him 6 weeks later, and he also happened to no longer have the autism symptoms. And those autism symptoms, the erratic behavior and aggression, only come back when he eats the junk food.
Wow.
And so we have very clear evidence in our home that eating organic is essential for avoiding glyphosate. And so we wanted to show and share, that information with other people. So we began that, we initiated that first glyphosate testing in America with the tap urine, breast milk. We found it in breast milk at 3,000 times higher than has been shown to cause sex hormone changes and liver and kidney damage in animal studies. And so that news actually kind of created waves around the world. And there's over 60 countries now that have restrictions or bans on glyphosate, particularly for that reason that it goes into breast milk. And the United States, however, has been failing to take action on that.
Mm.
So that initial testing sparked testing from other organizations on, crackers and cookies and snacks. And we eventually tested wine and beer and orange juice, found it positive in all of those, and many other types of foods. So to get to your question of why we tested loaded cereal, well, we just thought that name was, begging to be tested. Is it going to? We can see that it's loaded with sugar and highly processed foods and red food dye and blue food dyes that are banned in Europe. We can see that. We can see that it's loaded with frosting. I mean, who needs to feed their children a breakfast cereal, highly processed with frosting in the middle of it for
Mhm.
before school,
Right.
and have them all, jacked up on food dyes and sugar before school? I mean, that's just completely counterintuitive to what most people would do. I think, but apparently not. They're selling the cereal across America, and so we tested and found it, in fact, to be positive for heavy metal levels that are much higher than what the EPA allows in drinking water. In fact, the levels were, I'm sorry, I don't have it. Let me get it right in front of me right now.
Sure.
The levels were, and why I say drinking water is because they don't have levels to regulate in food, in cereal. So the aluminum levels were 1,650% higher than what is allowed, maximum EPA maximum allowable levels in drinking water. And the arsenic and cadmium levels were 200 to 400% higher than what the EPA allows in drinking water. And these are highly carcinogenic and highly toxic chemicals. Glyphosate levels were 174 up to 174 times higher than what has been shown to cause sex hormone changes and organ damage in animal studies. And there were trace levels of 8 pesticides detected, along with detectable levels of flupirum, which is a fungicide that has been shown to cause endocrine disruption in humans and animals at very low levels, and piperonal butoxide, which is an ingredient used in shampoo
Oh, wow.
to facilitate the killing of lice, was
Oh my
also
gosh.
found in this breakfast cereal. And, this is just deeply disturbing that is a breakfast cereal that is claiming to be, to have added vitamins in them, and claiming to, appear like something that would be healthy but fun,
Right.
to have for breakfast, it's not a treat. It's a threat to human health.
Absolutely. I mean, why do you need arsenic and cadmium in your breakfast cereal. It
No,
doesn't.
no, you don't, and it shouldn't be there. There are really no safe levels of these heavy metals.
What did you find when you studied fast food?
When we studied fast food, which we did, by the way, because we learned when we studied school lunches the year before, that we learned that fast food companies are actually the suppliers to school lunches. And we just find that abysmal and embarrassing. Actually, I think that most Americans don't know that because the U.S. government doesn't want the American people to know that Del Taco and Domino's and Pizza Hut are supplying their kids with school every day at school lunches, and how mineral and nutrient deficient they are. In fact, the lab that tested helped coordinate the testing for these samples. 43 school lunches we did and 42 fast food samples found them to have more toxins in these food than minerals and vitamins. And so what we found in school lunches was 100% positive for heavy metals, and again at levels up to 6,000 times higher than what the EPA allows in drinking water. And we found them, I believe it was again now 73% positive for um, wait, I'm sorry. I don't I'm starting to now like not have everything completely memorized because I've
There's a
been
lot of
saying it so much,
numbers.
but I'm going to just pull that up now. The fast food was 76% positive for harmful pesticides, and the school lunches were, I believe, 74% positive for harmful pesticides. And let's see, yes, 74% positive for harmful pesticides. The school lunches were 93% positive for glyphosate. The fast food samples were 100% positive for glyphosate. And 10% of the, which doesn't sound like a big number, but 10% of the school lunch samples, four of the samples were positive for an aviary contraceptive,
Oh,
which is
geez.
deeply disturbing. They can give this anti-parasitic called narcobazine. It's an anti-parasitic, but it also functions as an aviary contraceptive. What they found was when they gave this anti-parasitic, which is for a parasite called coccidiosis, uh, they found that it prevented the birds from laying eggs. So they can only give it to meat birds, not to egg laying birds. So that's why giving it to meat birds means it'll be found in the chicken, in the meat chicken in school lunches, and it was also found in Chick-fil-A when we tested the fast food samples. So that made a big stir. And unfortunately, Chick-fil-A responded not by saying, oh, we're going to make sure that doesn't happen again. They responded by saying they are retracting their statement that says no antibiotics ever in their food. They are
So what
going backwards. They're saying we do need to have antibiotics in the chicken, and that's because there's so many bird flus and so many sicknesses happening in chickens. There's sometimes they have to, the poultry industry kills off 60 million chickens a year sometimes because of different types of diseases. And what they're not acknowledging, Zara, is that this glyphosate that is sprayed on the chicken feed and the arsenic and all of these other toxic chemicals that are used in agrochemical farming and GMO monocrop farming, that's what's responsible for having chickens get sick in the first place.
right.
That destroying your gut microbiome, whether you're a chicken or a human, does not bode well for being able to fight, nasty bacteria. So
Yeah.
the bacteria grows in this chicken population of these confined animal feeding operations. They've got, thousands, if not millions of chickens all together in very close quarters. And then they wonder why they get sick. And then they wonder why they have to pump them full of antibiotics.
Yeah.
Well,
It,
stop feeding them poison in the first place, and then the chickens won't get sick, and
yeah,
give them humane conditions.
exactly.
And you won't have to use so many inputs, so many antibiotics and harmful any other types of drugs and medications. So the school lunches, highly toxic, very low in minerals. Same thing with the fast food samples, highly toxic, very low in minerals. We also found veterinary drugs and hormones in 40 to 60% of the top 10 um, fast food samples that we tested. We only tested the top 10 for those because it's highly expensive.
Mhm.
So that's where we found the norcarbazine, the veterinary drug and hormone. We also found two other antibiotics that can cause the hind legs of dogs and horses to go paralyzed. And another one is not approved for human use and shown to cause severe harm to humans when consumed. We also found butyrediol, which is a central nervous system depressant, which causes combativeness. And we found this at very high levels in 47%. of the fast food samples tested. So, you may not be eating fast food and your listeners may not. They may, be at the level where, they realize that that's just not healthy for them, even though it's highly convenient. I understand that. But your babysitter might be eating this fast food. The person driving the car next to you, your kid's, sports coach, your teachers, the policeman, might be eating this. They might be jacked up on butanediol in Jack in the Box, burger or Sonic or
Mhm.
one of these other foods that tested positive. So we're very concerned about this being a community issue, impacting our community in negative ways. You have to be living under a rock today if you don't realize that there's an increase in violence and mental health issues in America. Every single time you turn on the news, you see more news about violence, and the statistics show that we are in a mental health crisis and a
Yes.
physical health crisis in America today. And the fact is that the fast food toxins are greatly contributing to this problem, and the lack of minerals and nutrients are as well, but we can talk about that if you want next, if you have any other comments about just about the toxins.
Yeah, no, it's shocking. I mean, what I wanted to ask, and we maybe come back to the other point is I wanted to ask about how hard is it to get media attention to this research because it's shocking results, and you've already mentioned that you were being written off before. What kinds of reactions are you getting, and how do you get the word out?
It's very challenging to get the media to cover this. And to be honest, one time when I did get some coverage, we have to pay a professional PR person that has connections to be able to get the word out about this. And one of the times when I was on a TV show, it was a local, major network, but it was a local program. They said, "Are we going to be mentioning the brand names of these fast food places?" And I said, "Yes, I would like to. I would like to be able to say, Panera Bread had the highest level of glyphosate and the highest level of cadmium. Heavy metals was in and out French fries, and Sonic cheeseburger had lead, and all these different things."
Mm,
And they talked about it. They were supposed to be talking in a different different channel, but they mistakenly talked about it in front of me, and they said, "Well, these brands are not our sponsors, so we can go ahead and talk about it as long as we're not mentioning it. She mentions it, we don't." And so, that just shows you how the news is censored according to whether or not those brands are sponsoring, whether or not they have an ad,
right.
they run a commercial on that network.
Yeah.
So you, the viewer, should be aware if you're watching mainstream TV, you're only going to be seeing that which the commercials, the companies that present the commercials want you to see. So that means if Pfizer is a major sponsor of that network, you're not going to see information about vaccines or medications that they don't want you to see.
Mhm.
If Applebee's and McDonald's and Jack in the Box are putting commercials on that network, you're not going to see the news about their food that they or the food supply, right? They don't want you to know anything negative about GMOs or glyphosate or
Mm,
how these chemicals are contributing to the crisis that we have. $4 trillion are being spent on healthcare in America. That's three times the amount that's being spent on the military. And people are complaining about military all day long. What about our health? And it's
mhm,
the junk food advertisements that are controlling the media from telling you some
mhm.
very simple things that you can do to turn around your health, to save you tens of thousands of dollars, not just a year, for some people per month, on healthcare issues. And the number one thing to do is to go organic.
Right. Let's talk about organic. So your latest report ends with a call to action for policy support for organic farming and regenerative agriculture. So talk a little bit about that and how that's part of the solution.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, because we've been saying organic for years, and we will still say that, but we are also now really promoting regenerative organic, because we've learned in the process of learning about the food supply that a lot of organic farmers still till, and still contributes to the destruction of the soil, and many of them don't use cover crops. And regenerative organic farming increases the organic matter in the soil by utilizing cover crops, animal grazing, and low to no tilling. They also do not utilize GMOs. And if you're regenerative organic, not just regenerative, they don't utilize things like glyphosate and other toxic chemicals. And when they do that, the organic matter in the soil increases to such a level that eventually they don't need to use hardly any fertilizers, just perhaps the animals that are grazing, on that farm. And these tend to be smaller farms, maybe 300 acres instead of 10,000 acres. But we believe that's what we need to be brought back to America is ownership of small farms that can feed their community, not farms that are growing commodity crops.
Right.
It doesn't benefit you if you're a farmer to grow soy and corn and have it shipped off to another country in any way except for financial means. In fact, if you're growing GMO monocrop corn, you're poisoning your soil, you're poisoning yourself, you're poisoning your workers by spraying those, chemicals like glyphosate 2,4-D, dicamba, Parquat, all of those. You're poisoning your soil. You're poisoning your family. You're poisoning the animals. You're poisoning the earthworms in the soil. You're destroying your children's future, not just for their health, but their ability to farm in that soil.
Hmm.
If you destroy the soil quality, you're ruining the investment, right? That you have. You've invested in that land. You are slowly degrading and degenerating the quality of the soil, which would enable your children to be able to farm on that land and make a living. So, what we're promoting is regenerative organic farming, which regenerates the soil, increases the soil matter, which therefore increases the nutrient density that's available in that plant. And when we increase nutrient density and we reduce toxicity of the plant, then we are improving human health, pollinator health, pet health. Think about the dog foods, all the toxic things that are going in dog foods and cat foods, and how many 50% of dogs are dying with cancer these days. By the age of 10, I believe. Our pets are being they have shorter lives because of the toxins in the food supply, and for many people, it's just as close to them as a child. So we have a lot of grief in America today, a tremendous amount of grief
Hmm.
over the loss of not just our loved ones and our pets, but of their ability to um, fulfill in their potential. Any mother with a child with autism is facing grief every day and trauma in many cases every day because their child tries to hit them. They destroy the house. They, have to go to the bathroom. They have to help them go to the bathroom. They can't feed themselves.
Mm.
We are dealing with an entire generation, not just of children who are compromised, like a book, Beth Lambert's book, A Compromised Generation, is one of the first books that I read. So we're dealing with not just an entire generation of children that are compromised, but an entire generation of adults that are squashed in between taking care of a
Mhm.
family member, a parent usually, that has Alzheimer's and a child with autism. That is an impossible place to be in and not eventually have mental health issues yourself.
Yeah.
We really are crippling the function and the ability of America today, uh, largely due to the toxicity and the lack of nutrients in our food supply.
Hmm. On top of that, now we have this whole kind of wave of mRNA. We know about it through the vaccines for COVID, but it's now seeping into the food system as well. There are studies where they're trying to put mRNA in lettuce, or there's an Israeli company putting it in shrimp. We know it's in the hog production value chain as well. So, is that something that you have also on your radar? Is that something that you could actually test for?
We're not testing for mRNA right now. We are gathering information from ranchers that have said we won't use it. There are several ranchers. I don't have the list in front of me right now, but we know that is something that our volunteers and our researchers are looking at. And there are many ranchers, just mostly pasture raised, regenerative organic
Hmm.
ranchers, if you're concerned about your meat, that will not be using that. The ones that we talk to are like, oh no, we're not going to be using that. But I want to point out that the reason why most of them feel, or many farmers and ranchers feel that they have to use vaccines is again because of the toxic chemicals that are on the grains that they're eating in the first place. These animals
Mm.
are sick inside. and they are the processors of these animals. Thousands and thousands of them a day are seeing diseased livers, diseased kidneys, stomachs with cancer in them, and they cut these parts out and put them in dog and cat food.
Oh my
And the
goodness.
rest of the meat, they go ahead and process it anyway. It goes to Chick-fil-A, it goes to Olive Garden, and we have people who have reported on this that have worked at these processing plants. And so you are eating meat from animals. If you're not eating pasture-raised, organic, regenerative organic meat, you are most likely eating meat from animals that have diseased organs. And that is frankly just disgusting and unhealthy. And I believe it's criminal.
Yeah.
So, but that's the result of eating an antibiotic and something that causes cancer and nervous system damage and neurotoxicity on the grains. That's what happens to the animals when they're allowed to eat poison.
Right. So the organic label, I think there was some skepticism around, does it really mean that the food that you're eating is clean and raised in a certain level? I mean, I think it's such a broad label at this point that some people might be a bit skeptical of it. So talk a little bit about what to look for if you're making that transition towards healthier, cleaner food.
Sure. Well, ideally, it's best to grow your own food, but most people cannot do that. So, if you cannot grow your own food, but I would strongly urge you to try it. It is fantastic and fulfilling, and it just makes you happy. And your children learn an awful lot, even if you just start in a pot, with cherry tomatoes. It's fantastic. In addition to that, the next step would be to go to your local farmers markets or join a CSA and get food from your local farmer. The farmer gets 100% of the money that way. If you buy produce and food from the grocery store, they're only getting about 10 cents on the dollar. And there could be extra preservatives sprayed on the food in grocery stores. So if you can't buy it locally, I mean, if you can't grow your own, buy it locally and know your farmer. Know whether or not it doesn't have to be USDA organic. They could just tell you, look, we don't use GMOs, we don't spray toxic chemicals, we just haven't gone through the organic process. If you trust them, go ahead and
Mhm.
support them locally. That's the best way to get the highest nutrient density and the lowest toxins and give the farmer the most of the money. Next would be buying organic and non-GMO in the grocery store. If you're buying processed foods, non-GMO Project Verified does check to see whether or not there are GMOs in that food, and there has to be less than 0.9% GMOs to get the non-GMO Project Verified label on it. But non-GMO Project Verified has nothing to do with glyphosate or other toxic chemicals. So you want to also have the label of USDA organic on it, which does not allow both GMOs and toxic chemicals. Now, if you're lucky enough to have a grocery store that stocks things from regenerative organic certified or biodynamic, those two labels are most likely going to have not only no GMOs and no toxic chemicals, but they most likely will be higher nutrient density. The preliminary testing that we have seen shows that those types of farmers, because they regenerate the soil and protect the soil, they have higher nutrient density. And all of us want to get more for our money, right?
Mhm.
And so when you're spending money on something, you're actually paying for the nutrients. You're not just paying for the pretty packaging.
Right.
And when we tested fast food, we found that you'd have to eat 333 Chick-fil-A sandwiches in one day to get your recommended level of vitamin B3.
Hmm.
To me, that's a very high cost for cheap food, right? So you want to make sure that you're eating nutrient dense food as much as possible, and that starts with whole foods. But if you're going to eat processed foods or packaged foods, regenerative organic certified or biodynamic.
Great. That's really good advice. Um, what are some of the wins that kind of keep driving you forward? Because this is clearly very challenging and hard work, but what keeps you going?
Well, things like getting Costco to stop selling Roundup, seeing the increase of organic sales doubling, seeing a letter that I get, probably every week I get a letter from a mom who's thanking me for what I'm doing and what our organization is doing, and saying that when they went organic, their child got 85% of the symptoms went away. Their autism symptoms or their allergy symptoms or their eczema, their autoimmune issues. And that to me means, hey, we just got to keep going. I don't care if I'm tired or, you know,
Hmm.
worn out or, stressed out about things that are going on, or I'm being hassled by the opposition. It doesn't matter. We have to keep going because it's cliche, but it's true. Children are the future of our country and of our nation, our globe. And if we don't protect their safety and health, then, we're not protecting the future of our nation and of the world. So it's important. It feels like very important work to me. And as I tell people all the time, we will not stop. We will not give up because the love for our children will never end. And that includes the love for our country. And so I really appreciate everybody listening today. And there's a lot more to say. Maybe I can come back another time and share more. But I do have to go to a board meeting. So
That's
thank you so
fair.
much.
Absolutely. No, thank you for fighting this fight. Just before we let you go, let us know how people can find out more about your work and how they can support your organization.
Sure. They can go to momsacrossamerica.com. We also have .org. And please do sign up for our newsletter. You do that under Connect. And when you sign up for our newsletter, you'll get alerts on the brand new news we have. We will have more testing coming out on baby formula, gluten-free food, and Girl Scout cookies. And we'd like to
Hmm.
test a lot more other things. So please donate on momsacrossamerica.org. Every dollar goes a long way. We moms wear about 6 different hats, as you know, most moms do. And join us on our Monday night Moms Connect calls. We have a discussion. It's not a show, it's a discussion where you can chime in, you can contribute, you can ask questions. And we appreciate seeing everybody at 7 p.m. on Monday nights on our Moms Connect calls for mothers and others. Men are welcome too, who want actions and solutions to create healthy communities.
That's fantastic. Zen, thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. We really appreciate everything you're doing. And we do hope that you come back and tell us more about your work
I
when you have more
will.
time.
Thank you, Zahra. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Folks, if you like what you just heard, we hope you'll share this video with others. It was such an important message from Zen. Also, like and subscribe to this channel to help us expand our reach. You can also find us on Substack at collapselife.substack.com and sign up for our newsletter there. You'll get several articles a week, and you'll also get a chance to connect with a community of like-minded individuals who are on a similar path. We're also on Twitter at collapse_life, so we hope you'll follow us there too. Collapse Life is your home for information to open your eyes and take action in your life. We call it a thinking person's guide to civilization and demise, and we're so glad you've chosen to be with us today. We'll be back next week with another great guest. And in the meantime, remember to keep your chin up. It's only collapse. See you soon.